Hi, it's Dr. Melissa Corso, and today we're going to go over the Athlete's Guide to Mental Skills. So, by the end of this presentation, you should know the importance of mental skills training, how to set goals in order to make them more attainable and realistic, and help you achieve your game plan. We'll go over some different mental skills and when you would potentially use them. And we'll also talk about thoughts and behaviors that can get in the way of your success. So once you reach a certain level of competency, so you've reached a certain level of skill or understanding of the game, the next step in improving your performance is working on your mental skills. And that means that the mental skills become as important to how well or poorly you perform as the physical skills that you have. If you start thinking about the best and the worst game that you've had within one season, think about what the difference was. Was the difference physical? Was it your level of skill or your level of fitness? Or was it maybe a mental difference, right? Did you prepare differently? Were you more aware? Were you less aware? Were you more present? Were you less present? So thinking about that within one season gives you the understanding of how the mental game can really have an impact on your performance, because the level of skill or the level of fitness, for example, might not change dramatically throughout one season. So to talk about the importance of the mind, we're going to go over this graph to show you how, depending on how you feel, you might perform differently. So on the left here, if we go from the bottom of the graph all the way up to the top, we have performance. So the lower you are on the graph, you have poor performance. And if you go higher, so that line increases, right, you get better performance. And then if we start from left to right, we're talking about emotional arousal. So that would be how you feel. And on the left here, we have low. That would be like if you're feeling tired, you're feeling slow, heavy, drowsy. And if we move towards the right and we increase, you have moderately aroused, and this is where you would have your maximum or your optimal performance because you're right in the middle. And then if you keep going on the emotional arousal from left to right, you get over aroused or high arousal states, which is where you also get some decline in performance because now you're dealing with things like your heart rate going up, you begin to sweat more, you might breathe more quickly, you might feel anxious, your stomach feels off, or maybe you might feel some tension. Everybody responds to stress differently, and the situations that you face differently, but everyone will have a graph that looks like this, where depending how they're feeling, they're going to have a poor performance because they're under aroused, or poor performance because they're over aroused. And there's going to be somewhere in the middle where you want to be in order to have your optimal performance. Okay, so these feelings that we have with our heart rate, with our breathing, these are physical warning signs that we're over aroused. But mentally, you might find that your mind starts racing, you might start having negative thoughts or feeling anxious. Okay, so it's important that every time you're going to practice, every time you're going to a game, you're assessing where you stand on the scale, and then that will tell you what type of mental skills you can start to use to bring you into that area of optimal performance. Now, before we start talking about mental skills, we're going to talk about goal setting because this is important to lay the groundwork in terms of what motivates us and what's pushing us to practice these mental skills and physical skills. So the first thing is to think about the big picture, and that would be, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Okay, so for some people it might be playing just for fun. For some people it might be going to university and playing at the college or university level, whether that's in Canada, in the States. Maybe you want to get a scholarship, or you want to go overseas and play professionally, or you want to play for Team Canada. These are all goals and images that we have for ourselves. These are dreams that we have. And when we imagine these things, the best way to imagine them is in vivid color and images and feelings, and use this as your motivation as you start to train, and that's training physically and mentally as well. So, in order to create a vivid image, the first thing you need to do is go through ACT. A is to accept your present state. So, that's acknowledging where you are today. And you can go into detail. So, what level do you play at? What are your skills? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Um, and what is your current situation? C is to create your desired state. So, again, being specific with what your goals are, your long term goals. What is the end goal or dream that you want for yourself? And then T is what are the action steps to get there? There are going to be a number of different things here. And then the next step is to take these action steps to get there. So that brings us to goal setting. And goal setting is really important because if you do this well, it helps you take those steps that will lead you to achieve your dream. So, goals can be either performance or action goals. And these are things that you can control. These are actions or things that you can do on a regular basis to improve what you're doing or how you're playing. And there are outcome goals, and these are the bigger pictures. These are things that you want to see as a result of your practice. So, as I mentioned, the performance or action goals are something you can control. And outcome goals will happen if you start focusing on those day to day action goals because you're doing the work to get you that outcome, in essence. So, for example, if my outcome goal is I want to score more goals or a certain number of goals this season, my performance or my action goal might be to practice my free kicks, it might be to practice my one-on-ones, it might be to practice penalty shots, because those are things that I can do on a regular basis. In order to make this goal more actionable, okay, we're going to go through smarter goals, and this is something that you want to write down and try and keep up with as you go through your season. So the first thing is you want your goals to be specific. So you want to, for example, work on a specific skill. I want to work on my free kicks, okay? M is measurable. So in order to improve my free kicks, I want to spend another half hour after each practice going through my free kicks around, goal scoring range, okay? Attainable means that your goal should be something that's challenging but realistic for you. It should be reachable and within your control. So you don't want a goal that you can't achieve because that becomes a point of frustration or difficulty and you don't feel like you're improving. Right? So you're doing a lot of work but you're never getting closer to the goal. That can make you feel resentful or lose motivation. The R is for recorded. So for example, I'm going to print a calendar and I'm going to mark down all my practices, and every time I do my half hour of practicing free kicks, I'm going to check it off and I'm going to record how I'm doing towards achieving my goal. Time bound means that you give yourself a certain amount of time before you evaluate how you're doing. So, for example, I'm going to do this for a month and then I'm going to stop and see whether I'm doing what I'm saying I'm doing. And that's the evaluation part. So, that's checking yourself and saying, how often and how well am I doing what I said I was going to do? And reversible just means that you're stopping and reassessing. What can I change if it's not working? And how can I make that goal or update the goal if it is working? Okay. So the first strategy we're going to talk about is a calming strategy, and this is if you're too amped up. So that's if you're on that high end of the emotional arousal where you're feeling under pressure or stressed out. You feel like your heart is beating faster, you're breathing faster, and you're feeling a lot of pressure. Now, this pressure can create tension and change how you move, how you think, or what the outcome of your task will be. And so, having some strategies to relax under pressure are really important. And you can have these kind of in your back pocket so that when you notice that you're experiencing some of these things that are related with stress, you can go to these strategies. So the first is having a mentality where whenever you go out to a competition, you're really just going out to enjoy. You've done the hard work throughout the week, over the months, over the years. There's nothing you can do in that moment to improve what your skill level is or your fitness level is. You've already done all that work. So just go out and enjoy. The second is to focus on the activity at hand and not overthink what you're doing. And the last would be to use this breathing strategy. This breathing strategy is about stimulating the relaxation system in the body. So when you breathe in, you expand your belly almost like you're breathing in air to fill a balloon. And when you breathe out, you're pushing the air out of that balloon and out of your mouth. And you just repeat this, and you can start having a slow count and repeating this for, you know, 20, 30 seconds, and that can be helpful. Okay, so the next skill that we can talk about here is visualization and imagery. So I mentioned why the mind is so important when we talk about performance, but there's a lot of research that shows that if you took, let's say, 20 athletes that had the exact same ability and skill, and you gave half of them mental training and the other half didn't get it, those that had the mental training would outperform the half that didn't have any. And if you look at athletes who combine mental imagery and physical practice, they do better than people, or athletes rather, that only do mental imagery or only do physical practice. So it really shows the importance of mental skills as well as visualization and imagery in affecting how you learn a skill as well as how you perform. So in order to do this, you want to try and keep it fairly consistent every time you do it. So I like to go to an ideal place that you use to prepare. And you don't physically go there, you can do that mentally, and you imagine all of the different details. So for some people, this might be their bedroom. Some people might be a car. It might be a completely dark room where you can't see anything. Mine was always our team room in my cubby. Okay, so you're going to go sit there, and I want you to imagine everything there, how it smells, what it looks like, what it feels like. Okay, and as you go through this practice, you want to try and imagine things as vivid and clearly as you can. Now, I want you to then go through the steps of showing up to the field, walking onto the field. How does everything sound? What do you see? How do you feel? And then I want you to imagine yourself doing things well. So imagining beating players, winning 50-50s, defending well, communicating well, everything's going your way, passing, shooting, crossing the ball. Okay, how does that look? How does that feel? What do you see? Okay. And then I want you to imagine yourself doing mistakes and making mistakes and then recovering from them, overcoming the mistakes. So if you give the ball away, win it back and make a good pass. If someone gets by you, I want you to imagine catching up to them and winning the ball back, maybe slide tackling. Right? So I want you to imagine all of those different things. Again, how does that sound? How does that feel? What do you see? Okay. The more realistic you can make this, the better it's going to be in terms of visualization and how it prepares you. Some things I like to do include getting my heart rate up, trying to get a little bit nervous. I always get a little bit nervous before a game. So those are all important things to consider as you're visualizing, okay? Now, I want to talk about some self-defeating thoughts and behaviors. As people, not even just athletes, everyone out there acts consistent to their self-concept or their self-image or how they feel about themselves. So if you don't see yourself as successful, then your chances of succeeding are actually diminished. You have less chances of succeeding because you don't see yourself that way. It's kind of like that winner's mindset. So if you have self-defeating thoughts or behaviors that you constantly are thinking when you're playing or practicing or just in general, that really undermines your ability to perform optimally. You're kind of cutting yourself short. It's important to remember that our actions follow our minds. So I'm going to touch and just explain briefly some of these self-defeating thoughts and behaviors. And your homework here is to really try and identify some of these things in yourself and then kind of stop them before they actually interfere with your performance and try and turn it around, okay? Because there's no sense knowing these things if you're not going to try and identify them in yourself. So the first is fear. So fear is, of course, being afraid of something, but it leads to the fight or flight response in our body. That's the heart rate going up, you're sweating, that tension that you might feel. And as I mentioned, it can change how you react and think when you're playing. Anger is really important, and it's often anger or frustration is kind of our default when things don't go our way, or maybe the ref or coach says something we don't like. But you have to learn how to control your emotions, or they will control you. Okay, you change the way you think and act when you're angry. Anxiety, this is kind of generalized feelings of uncertainty or dread, maybe a sense that something bad is going to happen. Again, this will just change your physical response where you're getting that heart rate, you're sweating, and you're not thinking the same way, you're not working the same way. Your mind isn't focused on the game at hand. Self-consciousness, so this might be if you're afraid of looking bad or embarrassing yourself, you might focus more on the image of how you look rather than the task at hand. Again, you're focusing on things that really are outside of your control, and you're not focusing on what you're doing. So that reduces, your performance on those tasks and overall, because your mind isn't, where it should be. Perfectionism, this is where you might be very self-critical. You tend to be more negative-minded, kind of having a negative mindset, and oftentimes you feel like you can never do enough. Perfectionists are often fueled by the fear of failure, and you might have a very self-condemning voice, meaning you're hard on yourself. The difficulty here is everything's very negative. You don't see the good that you're doing, and it's difficult to kind of function this way, and you might find that in those moments of negativity, you kind of spiral down and you start to get really down on yourself, and you can't find a way out. Everything you do is bad, and then you see everything through that lens. Stubbornness, this is an unwillingness to learn, not being open to change, and you're not going to take risks, or you tend not to take risks. And oftentimes, this unwillingness to learn really kind of cuts off the learning process, because if you're open to different experiences and trying new things, you'll often find things that work well for you, maybe work better for you, or you'll learn a new skill. And oftentimes, the risks that you're not willing to take are really what's going to help you get to the next level. Lack of motivation is pretty self-explanatory, but it's really just some athletes have that drive to become the best, or the best that they can be. And if you don't have that, you're not going to take the extra steps or the extra practices or things that you need to do in order to improve yourself beyond what others are doing. Competitiveness, you need to be willing to do the work and not be easily discouraged. I don't think there's an athlete, like an elite athlete story out there that I've heard that doesn't have some type of obstacle or issue in the way that tried to stop them from achieving what they did. So you need to be willing to do what you have to do to get where you want to be. And when things don't go your way, you shouldn't be discouraged. You need to stay competitive and keep trying. Distractions. This is a big one. Distractions are things that might be in your lifestyle that conflict with what you need to do to be an elite athlete. These are things like, not wanting to give up your McDonald's, your fast food, not wanting to give up your screen time at night so you don't get enough good sleep and recover properly. This comes down to discipline, and distractions really can be a detriment to your performance, because right now it might not have an impact, but it feeds into how you progress. It might lead to an increased risk of injury, but it also leads into your lifestyle and your routine over the years. The last thing is persistence, and this is related to that competitiveness, but it's really about remaining optimistic during difficult times. Not everyone has that kind of mentality, and of course, it's not easy. But the most successful people out there are people who look at setbacks as opportunities for a comeback. Right? So don't look at difficulties or obstacles that you face along the way as being totally negative, but as an opportunity for you to do something great and come back from that. So, here we're talking about mental toughness, and this kind of feeds into the positive side of what we were talking about on the other slide about self defeating behaviors. And there are the 7 C's of mental toughness. So, a person who is mentally tough looks at competition as a challenge to rise up rather than something to back away or run away from, right? So, anytime you see something difficult ahead of you, really try and take that head on rather than trying to find a way around it. So, the first is competitiveness. A competitor will always find a way to win. You take those bad breaks or things that go against you and you use them to drive yourself even further, to push you. Into being better rather than as an excuse as to why things are going wrong or a reason to quit, right? So it's really about saying, hey, this isn't working in my favor, but I'm going to succeed despite that. The second is confidence. So a confident athlete has a can-do attitude. They really believe they can handle anything that comes their way. So they go onto the field thinking it doesn't matter what happens, it doesn't matter who I play, no matter what, I'm going to be able to succeed. The third is control. So this comes down to being able to control your emotions and your behaviors. So going back to the previous slide, getting that anger in check or making sure that you're persistent or you're motivated and you're not letting those distractions get in the way. You focus on what you can control and you don't let the things that you can't control affect you. So, this is the hallmark of mental toughness. This is about being poised, concentrated, and have your emotions under control, even when you're under the greatest pressure or in the most challenging situation. And, even the best athletes out there aren't always like this, right? But it's about trying to maintain that control as much as possible. Committed. This is a big one, or commitment, right? This is about focusing your time and energy on your goals and your dreams. You need to be self-directed and highly motivated. So that means, making those goals for yourself and going out there and practicing even though your coach doesn't tell you to or your parents don't tell you to. In order to reach those big goals and dreams, you need to stay committed to the task. And that means, having those action goals. Having that extra practice, staying motivated and disciplined to avoid those distractions, and focusing all your time and energy on what you want to achieve. Composure, so you know how to stay focused and deal with adversity, and this kind of ties into some of the other points that we said, but it's really about saying when something goes wrong, how can I stay focused and be present in the game in order to perform? The 6th C is courage, and this is about willing to take risks, doing things that other players might not be willing to do, and that might distinguish you. And the last is consistency, and this is about your inner strength. Can you play your best even when you're not feeling well or you're feeling your worst, okay? You don't make excuses, you find a way to show up, and you find a way to be the best you can be without making any excuses. Okay, so in summary, mental skills really have a big impact on your level of play, particularly once you get to a certain level of skill. Goal setting is an important process to go through and allows you to create a game plan to achieve your goals and dreams. There are different situations where you can implement different mental skills. For example, the diaphragmatic breathing, if you're too amped up, you're too excited, right? You can use that to calm down. Visualization will help you prepare for a game and get you in the right mindset to focus. It might help get you amped up. In terms of some general skills to improve your mental skills as an athlete, is being able to identify and change some of those self-defeating behaviors that we talked about. and work on aspects of mental toughness, and those two things go hand in hand. The last thing is that practice makes perfect. A lot of the times we emphasize practicing your skills. How many touches do you get on the ball? How many passes do you make going out there and practicing your free kicks, right? But the same thing applies for mental skills, okay? You're not going to get better at anything if you just listen to these presentations or you go to these classroom sessions and you don't practice what they've talked about. I've referenced this book here, Mind Gym, and I've kind of scraped the surface of what this book talks about. So if you're really interested in improving your mental skills more in depth and hearing stories about different athletes and how it helps them or what they do, this is a great little book to read. As usual, if you're interested in getting more information or you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me, Dr. Melissa Corso, either by email, Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Thanks, guys. So the last slide here is talking about the growth mindset. Now, the opposite of the growth mindset is called the fixed mindset. And this assumes that everything about us, our character, our intelligence, our ability, our skills, are static. So they don't change, they don't move, and we cannot change them in any meaningful way. Now, in contrast to that, we have the growth mindset, and this thrives on challenges. It says, it's the idea that we see failures not as evidence that we aren't good enough or that we don't have the skills or the natural ability, but it's a starting point for growth and for pushing our current abilities. This growth mindset is really saying, I can change, I can improve, I can become better if I put in the work and if I push myself to overcome those challenges or obstacles. It really comes down to the idea that this quote kind of summarizes, which is hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. And I truly, truly believe this. In order to take advantage of the growth mindset, you need to be able to kind of sit there and reflect on yourself. And that's part of knowing yourself, right? So as a person, as an athlete, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What do you need to work on? And if you identify those things, that becomes your starting point to your goal setting, to kind of go back to the beginning there. And we'll give you some action steps to turn those weaknesses into strengths. That comes down to, unfortunately, doing things at practice that you don't like to do or you aren't good at doing in order to improve. If you lose every single one-on-one, the solution isn't to stop doing one-on-ones. It's to do more, right? It's to become better. Having a growth mindset goes back to the idea of being open, not stubborn, okay? So you want to be open-minded to what you can learn today and how that can help you become better tomorrow. Every single day you will encounter someone or you'll have some experience that will teach you something or provide you the opportunity to learn something. And, depending on your mindset, you might take that from the experience or you might not notice it. Right? So this is really important. This is where that reflection comes in, and stop and think about what happened today, what can I take away from that, and being open to learning from everyone, whether it's your coaches, your technical director, your parents, the referee, the other team, your teammates. Every single day there's the opportunity to learn something. You just have to be open to it.